Hello.
Live on Instagram.
Awesome. Pop it up on my iPad. Da. Oh, there I am. Perfect. All right. Anybody here yet? Not on Instagram. You doing good back there? Oh, a couple people. Hello, hello. How's everybody doing? Awesome, awesome. Okay, we'll wait a couple minutes as usual for everybody to come on and then we'll get started. All right. Hi guys, how's everybody doing? I'm just gonna go this way. Hi Joy. Hi Martin, all the way from Holland. Oh, that's awesome. Thanks for watching. Hi Nicole. Hi Donald. Hi Kyla. Oh, awesome. Okay. Yes, I am so excited too for the flower. Today we're going to be doing a pulled project, which is so exciting. This is my first ever live stream playdate where we are doing a pulled hand sculpted piece rather than all casting. So I'm super excited. I hope you guys are excited too. I wanted to kind of cover all of our casting, elements first before we went into this for anybody who's new to it, but this is going to be super, super fun. Hi, Ivy. Hello, hello. Hi, Veronica. Okay, so I'm just going to wait another minute. Hi, everybody. Hi on Instagram. Awesome. Is anybody going to be following along today? Remember that I always post afterwards, so any piece that you make sure to comment a picture of it in the post after this so that I can see everybody's beautiful pieces. I've been really, really loving seeing everybody's finished pieces from the last live streams that I've been doing, so thank you guys so, so much for being so excited about this and following along. It's been awesome to be able to kind of see everybody, every couple weeks. Super nice. Awesome. All right, we'll wait one more minute and then we'll get started. Hi, Kim. All right. Okay. So let's see. Instagram's doing good back there. Hi, Stephanie. Hi, Carol Ann. Awesome. So while we're waiting, I will show everybody the piece that we're going to be making today. So this is our pulled hand sculpted abstract flower here. Our watercolor flower. So you can see this really, really cool texture. I'm excited for the hand sculpting and pulling, but I'm really excited for this watercolor effect on the inside. Hold it up so Instagram can see too. So it's all going to be hand sculpted. We are going to use a form, but it's not quite a mold. You guys will see once we start going into it, but it's a brand new form that we just came out with. For anybody who got the kits, you will have gotten it in your kit. And yeah, so that's what we're going to be doing. I also have a smaller version that was made with the same exact form. So you can see there's a lot of variety that you can get with this. Awesome, awesome. Okay, so the piece that I was actually inspired by for this project was I did some glass work, actual glass, not just Isomalt glass. I did some glass work a couple of years ago now in Corning in New York. I got the opportunity to go up there and to take some courses up there and some different things. And I made this flower that I was really, really inspired by. So this is glass. This is real glass here, and you can see It has that beautiful texture inside and all of the colors. When I posted about this, I saw a couple other people got to go up there and do it too, and it was so much fun, and I knew that I wanted to use some of the techniques that I learned there and incorporate them into sugar one day. And finally, I've had a little bit more time at home now, so I've been able to play around with some techniques that I've been wanting to try, and that's how I came up with my watercolor flower. So this is the one that I made out of glass, and then you can see I did a little bit smaller version just because I knew this would be going on cakes and you know, desserts and things like that. So yeah, that's what we're going to be doing today. I also did a little bit of glass training in New Orleans with an amazing artist, Craig Richards. We did some, I guess, pulled glass work, some sculpted glass work, and some blown glass as well. I absolutely love working in glass, and it's very similar to working with Isomalt, so I love kind of taking different traditional artistic mediums and incorporating them into sugar, because a lot of them have not been, especially in the glass and sculpting world, haven't yet been incorporated into sugar. So anything that I can do, you know, to kind of use different skills and different techniques, I always love to incorporate. So that was my inspiration for this piece. And so yeah, we will go ahead and get started. Anyone who is following along, if you want to preheat your Isomalt, we're going to go ahead and heat it. We are using the blue Isomalt today. So you can use any color that you want to. This is just the same one that I did in the picture, so that's what I'm going to be replicating. But of course you could adjust what colors you're going to be using, but this is of course my Simi Isomalt, so pre-cooked, ready to use. There's no temperatures or recipes, you're just melting it down in the microwave for 30 seconds and then 15-second intervals. Like I said, we're using this blue, but if you have clear and you want to color it, you can use an edible airbrush color for this. That's what's going to give you the clear effect, and then we're going to paint on top some of the more opaque depth that we're going to get with the painting effect that I'm going to show you. And the painting that we're doing on top of the Isomalt is going to be a really cool technique that is exclusive to Isomalt. You can't do this technique on anything else, because we are going to be doing some blowtorching with our painting, and that's what's really going to create that kind of depth and that color mixing in and dispersing really, really cool. So yeah, we're going to be using our blue Isomalt, and we will go ahead and get started. Alright, I'm going to turn you guys down. If you have any questions, Mom and Dad are both here, and they will be able to read through the chat and shout out any questions. So if you have any questions, please write them in the chat, and I will be happy to answer. So just 1 second, and I will tilt you guys down.
Hi, everybody.
Hello, world.
Okay. So, just tilt you down. And I'll just take a second to get everybody in position, make sure that you can see. Alright, where we're at here. Okay, there's just a slight delay on my iPad that I've set up next to me, so I want to make sure that that is all good before we start. Alright, okay, that looks pretty good. Okie dokie, so I'm going to move my flowers out of the way now so that nothing happens to them as we're working. Okay, yes, so like I said, I already went ahead and melted down my Isomalt, so 30 seconds, then 15-second intervals. Now, I have this Simi mat, the Silpat mat that I usually have underneath my work surface that I use in all my live streams. You can use a Silpat mat if that is what you have. It will work, but what I actually prefer when we're doing pulled techniques is to do the pulling process on one of these silicone mats. Now, last week, or earlier this week, I should say, I did post a video all about the pulling process, not the specific flour, but just kind of the preparation to get there of pulling. So if you saw that, you'll see that I like to work on this thin silicone mat. So this is a silicone mat as well as the Silpat, but you can see it's a much different texture. It doesn't have that kind of slick sheen to it, so it's not going to stick, and it's not going to get that impression that the texture of the Silpat mats have, and it's just really, really flexible and easy to fold and to work with. So I'm going to be using that, but I am going to actually leave this mat underneath because I like to buffer the heat a little bit. I'm working on a metal table, and metal conducts heat, so it can sometimes insulate too much heat, and what happens with that is if it gets too hot when the Isomalt is on the mat, it is going to insulate a lot of heat, and it can actually stick because the pores of the silicone will open up. It's just like skin. They open up from heat, and the Isomalt, if it's too hot, can get stuck down in them and stick to the mat. If that happens, it's okay. You just have to run it under a little bit of cool water and it will completely release. But to avoid that happening, if you're working on a countertop that is metal or even wood or like a plastic folding table, if you're working on that, those all hold a lot of heat. So that's why I like to double mat to keep that from happening. Now, if you're working on a countertop like a stone, a marble, or granite, you will have the opposite effect, right? Your table gets very, very cold and it stays cold. So sometimes if you're just working on the silicone mat, it can cause it to get too cool too quickly. So I like to have that double mat just in case. It's not completely necessary because, like I said, if it sticks, it's okay. So if you only have one mat, it's all right. Or you can experiment by working on maybe like a cutting board that's heat safe or something like that. But that's what I'm going to be using for pulling my Isomalt. I'm going to grab the Isomalt out.
Sydney, Crystal
Yes.
would like to know how much of the Isomalt she should heat up and at what temperature, like at normal power?
Yes, you want to use full power for this because Isomalt needs to get very, very hot to melt, and you can go ahead and melt all of it. So what we're going to do is I'm actually going to show you guys this process first. So if you're following along at home, or even if you're watching the replay and you're planning to do this, what I would highly recommend, because this is a little bit more of an intensive process that you really need to focus on, is I would watch me first. So I'm going to do one all the way through first. I would recommend watch first. Don't be playing with your stuff yet, and then I'm going to do another one right after. So I'm going to do two. The first one I recommend watching. The second one you can follow along if you would like to now or when you're doing the replay, and that is just going to make sure that you can kind of see everything and have a direction to know where you're going and what the goal is here. And then I will go ahead and I will just have you guys do it along with me. So watch first, and then we'll go ahead and do another one. Also, watching back on these live streams, I realized that I talk with my hands a lot. So sorry guys if I'm moving around all over the place, but at least to make sure you know it's not frozen or anything, because I like to talk sometimes. So I do apologize for that. But yeah, basically what we're going to do is we are going to take our silicone mat, the baking liner mat, and we're going to pour the Isomalt out. So I heated up my Isomalt. You can go ahead and heat all of it for this project, because we are going to be doing both of those pieces, or you can just remelt the one that you made if you use all of it at once. That's fine too. You don't need to grease or powder or anything on this mat. You just want to pour a little bit out here. Do about that much. Okay. Now, remember that Isomalt is about 300 degrees, so you don't want to touch it. Make sure that you are wearing your gloves. If you got the accessory kit that was for this live stream, it has those gloves in there. The white ones go on first, and then the cotton ones, the cotton white ones go on first, and then the blue nitrile gloves go on top of those. That is going to buffer the heat. Remember that I've been doing this for about 13 years, and my hands no longer are heat sensitive, so it's easier for me to show you in more detail. But definitely wear the gloves as you're working, because it is quite hot. Okay, so I'm just folding my mat over now, just this top silicone mat. I'm folding it over and I'm lightly pressing to make sure it's all stuck together and peeling away. And so what we're doing is we're cooling this down and creating a clay rather than a liquid that pours into molds. We do want to hand sculpt this. Okay, so I'm just folding, folding, folding. Now you don't need to have a heat lamp when doing this. I do it just right on my cool table. If you have a heat lamp, you can have it set up next to you, and then you can put your excess Isomalt under it, but don't worry about it if you don't have one. We'll talk a little bit more about that in a few minutes. But at this point, the goal is cooling, so we don't want any extra heat. We want to just keep folding in cool air, and you can start to see it's thickening a little bit. Now, another thing that I like to do for this process is I like to slide it over, because even with that second mat underneath, the table still gets very hot. So if you can move it over to a cool spot, that's always going to be best. And notice how I'm alternating which sides I am folding. So I'm not just folding the same direction every time. I'm alternating to keep it nice and consistent. And the other thing that I'm paying attention to, okay, so I'm moving it over again, is that I am going to line up the edges. So this edge of the puddle is going to roughly line up with the opposite edge, just meaning that I'm not stopping before it and I'm not folding way past it. I'm lining up the halves, or folding it directly in half, and then slowly peeling it back so that we're not splattering liquid Isomalt anywhere from going too fast. I know some people are intimidated by Isomalt because it's so hot, but you guys make cakes, right? Or maybe you make cookies, or maybe you just cook. You work with ovens and stovetops all the time, so you are used to working with things that are even way hotter than this. So just wear your gloves and be cautious, and you won't have any problem. Alright, so I can feel now that the Isomalt is very, very thick. It's not quite a liquid anymore, so I can go a little faster without worrying about it splattering. So I'm actually going to hold one side of the mat down, hold the other side, and you can see that it's going to start to release the faster that we go. So I'm still alternating, and the goal to this is to get it to release from the mat easily without sticking. I do apologize if my camera is shaking a little bit, just because my table is not the sturdiest.
Can we hold it?
Yeah, sure. Dad will hold it down for me a little bit. Thank you. Okay, so I can see now with gloved hands, if you try and pick it up, I still have a couple spots that are sticking, so I want to continue to fold it until there's no sticky spots. Okay, that should be perfect.
I think the camera was still going.
Alright, so now you can see that I can pick up my Isomalt and it's not sticking to the mat or my hands or anything. It is basically ready to go, but as you can see, it's still quite hot, it's quite soft, and anything that we sculpt into it is not going to hold its shape. So what I like to do is pull it. So this is where the name pulled sugar or pulled Isomalt comes from. It's when you're folding in even more cool air. So essentially the same thing as what we were just doing on the mat, but now you can actually pick it up and handle it. Now notice as I'm folding, I'm only folding in one direction. I'm not twisting this up and I'm not kneading it like gum paste and fondant. I'm just folding it over, and then I like to roll it a little bit just to cool it off and to smooth everything out before I continue folding. You see those beautiful streaks and that satin finish in the Isomalt. That's all the air that you're folding. So that's why it's very important to keep it as consistent as possible. You want to make sure that you're not stretching it out so it's super uneven. You want this to be pretty much an even thickness as you go. Otherwise the thinner spots will cool faster than the thicker.
Did anybody practice?
Yeah, did anybody practice with their pulling this week? Or if you've done pulled sugar before, let us know. So I'm just going to keep doing this until it feels like the texture that I like. I know that's a little bit vague, but basically you're going to learn this as you go. It's just like working with modeling chocolate or fondant or gum paste. As you work with it, you know how much you need to knead it before you start to get it a nice texture. But remember that this is kind of the opposite as fondant and gum paste and modeling chocolate, where the more you knead those and the more you touch them, the more and more pliable they get. With this, the more that you knead it and touch it, you're cooling it down and hardening the texture. So it's very important not to overwork this. Now I do specifically make my Isomalt to dry very, very slow, so you are going to have a little bit more time to work with it even without having the heat lamp. But basically we're just going to stretch and fold, and what I like to say if you're unsure at the beginning is just stretch and fold it until it feels a little bit tougher than when you started. Okay, that's kind of your sign. You can see when I kind of put it into a blob here, it doesn't immediately turn back into a puddle like it did when I first picked it up. It is holding its shape a little bit, but you also want to make sure you don't pull it too much so that it is going to not make a dent or be able to be sculpted. So as you work with it, you're going to find that happy medium. You'll also get that beautiful satin shine and that finish.
Sidney, you've gotten about 20 people on. Do you want to explain to them that you're doing the run-through?
Yes, so anybody who's new, if you're following along, don't worry about making your piece right now. I'm going to do 2 of these flowers, and it will be better if you watch the first one just to have an idea of what we're doing. Then when I do the second one, you're welcome to follow along if you'd like, or if you'd like to watch again and then do it after, that's totally fine too. But this is kind of like the practice one, just to see what we're doing. Just because I can't stop and start as much once we go, and you guys can't stop and start as much, so it's better to know what you're doing and what to do next rather than having to wait for me. Okay, so once I get it to this texture, if you have a heat lamp, I use a 250 watt bulb. You can put it under your heat lamp, but I'm just going to reheat after I'm done to make another one. So I'm going to cut off as much as I need, about a golf ball size. Okay, roll it into a ball. And then I'm going to take my former. So this is our brand new Simi former here, and it's just basically a silicone cone, and that is what we're going to make our flower out of. So I'm going to take my ball of Isomalt and just start pushing it down over top of the former. Don't worry too much about what the edges look like right now. You want to try and get them as thin as you can, but kind of just focus on the whole thing. I'm also going to start pulling up a little bit at the top so that we can make the curlicue stem. And this is just a start. So this is really just to get that cone shape going. Okay, and then you can see it just easily comes right off, and I can start stretching out the stem a little bit, flaring out the inside. I like to do an uneven edge, so it's okay that it's not perfect on the edge here because this is supposed to be abstract. It's a fantasy flower. It's not made after a specific flower. I can always put it back on the former if I want to. So you just want to work quickly. That's the key with this. Don't get frustrated if it's not perfect the very first time, because that's the beauty of Isomalt, is that it can be remelted and reheated as much as you want. There's no limit. So all you have to do is melt it back down and make another one. It's great for practice.
What if it gets too cool?
If it gets too cool, you can reheat it lightly all over with the torch and then wait about 10 seconds before you touch it, but it's going to be easier to try and work as fast as you can, and if that one doesn't work, just make a new one. So either reheat this, or if you have a little bit of extra, I'll show you in a minute how I reheat that to make another. Okay, so you can see you can flare this out as much as you want, or keep it a little bit smaller. Okay, I have my my stem here. I'm going to start to form that first, because we're actually going to go back and reheat the edges to ruffle them up a little bit, but we want to get the stem in shape now. So this is where my plastic dowel is coming through, and I'm just going to wrap the whole thing around. You can just freeform it or leave it straight if you prefer, but because this is kind of an abstract look, I liked that curly Q tail.
Stephanie's going to substitute a pen.
Yeah, you could absolutely use a pen. You can use like a tool, the handle of a tool, anything you can slide it off easily. You don't really want to use a wooden dowel just because it's going to stick a lot easier, so I would recommend something metal or plastic.
Nicole said if you stop now, it'll look like a calla lily.
Ooh, it definitely would. That would be super pretty. All right, and then that just has to sit for a second. You can hold it in front of a fan if you want to help cool the shape. All right, and there you go. So that is the beginning of our flower. You can see the edges aren't quite ruffled and thin and perfect yet. We're going to go back and do that, but I want you guys to go ahead and make yours first, because it's easier to do that step when it's warm. So if I show you now, you know, by the time you get to yours, we will be kind of out of sync. So I'm going to go ahead and have you guys make yours. So if you are following along, I'm going to make another one, and it's good to just see it twice, because sometimes you pick up on certain things that you may have missed the first time. I always like to see demonstrations a couple times, and if you're watching the replay of this, you know, you can go back and watch it as many times as you want. But yeah, you can see it's not too hard. I picked a very abstract piece for this, so it really doesn't have to be perfect. Remember that flowers, you know, naturally are soft, so they are going to kind of fall to whatever they're sitting on. So if it looks a little bit slumped, it's okay, because that's gravity. You can kind of sit it down and position the tail a certain way if you want to, but yeah, that's the basis of our flower.
Anna said this technique would be helpful making Christmas trees.
Yes, definitely. And I have something I'm going to show you later too, which will make super cool Christmas trees. We have kind of a variation on this.
Avalon said the mold would be great for a phonograph.
Oh, that's awesome. That's actually what I was thinking of, because I made some slightly smaller ones that I'll show you in a little bit. It looks just like that. That would be really cool. Somebody do that project. I want to see it. Okay, so if you'd like to follow along, you can go ahead and start pulling your Isomalt now, or if you need to reheat your Isomalt afterwards, that's what I'm going to do. So you can just melt this excess back down. It's a little too hard. It's kind of pliable, but I definitely could not shape this at this point. I can feel it's too hard. So I'm going to pop this back in the microwave on my mat, so fold it in half, for 5-second intervals. That way I don't have to start back from a liquid in the bowl. I can just reanimate this Isomalt a little bit since it is warm and use it. This only works if your Isomalt still has warmth and pliability to it. If it's cooled all the way down to a rock, you need to start from a liquid, otherwise it won't heat evenly.
Sidney Kelly thought of a Horn of Plenty for Thanksgiving too.
Oh, that would be really cool, like a cornucopia. Oh, see, I knew you guys would have tons of different cool ideas.
Kyla says, come Thanksgiving, I'm going to expect a Horn of Plenty with some of your gorgeous fruits. Gramophone would be amazing, Avalon.
Definitely, yeah. I have a class that I do that's a cornucopia, and we hand sculpt it a little bit differently, but this would definitely make it super, super fast and easy.
You'd have to have a very large form for that.
You would, yeah. Okay, so I just do 5-second intervals. I know I did a little bit longer, just one, because I was talking, but also because my microwave's not very strong, so I did more like 10 seconds. But you can see that it heated unevenly, so I'm being very careful about not touching this, but it did go back to more of a pliable, liquidy form, but not completely back down, so it's going to pull a lot faster.
Remember, it's hot.
Yeah, remember that it's hot. You're wearing your gloves, not sticking your finger in it. But that's what I do whenever I don't have a heat lamp next to me, or if I just need to reheat a little bit. I always use that kind of process rather than starting from a liquid, because it's going to take a lot longer from a liquid than it does from a solid.
But there's beautiful, the cake safe heat
Yes, you can use like the heat stands, the hot boxes from Cake Safe. Those are awesome. If you saw my YouTube video, I have another YouTube video on how I build my stand. It's just out of PVC, and it stays nice and warm with the 250 watt heat lamp. You can use that. That's what I do whenever I'm doing longer projects. So if I know that I just want to pull a whole bunch of Isomalt and then just cut pieces off as I need to for a long period of time before I'm going to repull, that's when I use my heat lamp. But for one-off pieces like this, where you're just making one or two, it's easier to just reheat it. Okay, so again, I'm just doing what I did before and folding it until it's not sticky anymore, and then I'm going to fold it in some cool air until it is back to a texture that I like, so it's a little bit firmer. If I were to try and sculpt it right now, you absolutely could if you prefer a really pliable texture, but I find that it stretches way too quickly and it kind of gets out of control, so I like a little bit of coolness to this.
Would you say that's 6 ounces?
Probably everything that I poured out was 6 ounces or maybe a little bit less. I believe my flour only weighed about 2 or 2.5 ounces for the bigger one, and I made a smaller one.
Sapphire Rain Tears says she can't see anything. I just want to make sure that's not the case still.
Make sure,
on
yeah.
Instagram?
Right on
On
Instagram.
Instagram.
Can you guys see me and hear me okay, or did it freeze? All right.
Seems to be okay on this end, so I just want to make sure.
Okay. Sometimes it can be connection. Okay, so I'm going to do a little bit bigger piece now, so I'm going to use all of what I had, and then just start kind of pressing it over my former. So depending on how much you do, you can even go really, really tiny. Use like a gumball size and make a teeny tiny little flower. So I'm pushing it down over the edge, and then pulling upwards to create the stem.
Do a side view of that.
Okay, so the end of the former is right about here, and I'm pulling it up and off of that former. You can even roll it to get some of the finger dents away and help it elongate slightly.
It looks like a shell also.
Oh yeah, that would be beautiful. Okay, so I'm going to actually stretch this down all the way and almost have it go flat into my mat. So I'm just kind of pulling. This is going to give you that really big fluted flower, like the one that I had painted.
A witch's hat.
Ooh, witch's hat! Oh, we're getting so many cool ideas. Alright, and then just reshape the stem. So you can see, I'm just kind of pulling this out. I try not to push too much on the corner where the former ends, because I don't want to create any sort of line or crease there. We can get rid of it later, but I just want to make sure that it's going to be nice and smoothly fluted. So see, I'm actually going bigger than my former, so you could go much, much bigger if you wanted to. This is really just to give it that tapered to a point look on the inside, which is all you need to give it that kind of fluted look. See that? Alright, so that should be about good. I like to take it off my former before it's getting cool at all. So I'm just wiggling it. There we go.
Any news on Instagram?
Everybody says it's good.
Okay, good.
I can see in here, so.
May have just been a little connection issue on that side. Okay, so I'm just going to shape and pull my flower. You can do more ruffly flowers, you can do smoother flowers, you can kind of twist them, whatever you prefer. I'm going to show you, remember, how to do the edges in a second, so don't worry too much about what the edges look like right now. Try and get them as thin as you can, just to give them a more delicate look, but this is your flower. It can be however you like it. Okay, so see how I'm just moving it around? It is kind of like glass, where you don't want it to sit on one direction too long because it's going to start slumping. So I'm just rotating it, getting it to that shape that I like, making sure that my stem is nice and consistent. If your stem gets too long, you can just cut it off with scissors, or if you want it to come to a point, which I think I'm going to do for mine because the end's looking a little chunky, is I'm going to cut it at an angle just like a real flower stem. Okay, these extra pieces, it's very important that you don't mix these back into Isomalt under your lamp because they're already too cool and hard and they won't reanimate under the lamp. You'll just get lumpy Isomalt. So I throw those back into the bowl and then remelt them. So you can see from setting my flower down, he slumped, so we'll just pick him back up. Alright, I'm going to shape my stem. So we'll get a nice pretty curly Q here, and then I want to try and give it a little bit of a spot to sit. Not really a flat spot, but just so that there's one spot that it rests easily and gives it kind of a center of gravity. I like to curl my stems around a little rather than going straight back so that you see it from the front. Okay, and then what I like to do at this point is I am going to cool it a little quicker with a fan. So I'm going to cool this down just a little. You don't want to cool it completely all the way because we still want a little bit of heat at the edges, because warm is going to take to warm easier than warm to cool. So when we reheat the edges to ruffle them, it's going to be easier if it's a little bit warm. So I'm mostly focusing the heat on the bottom half so that while I'm working on the edges, it's not slumping when I'm not, you know, noticing. It's not kind of running away from me. Okay, so we just want to cool this, not until it's cool, the actual piece is cool, just until it's solid and doesn't feel like it's going to collapse on you as you're working on the edges. How's everybody doing? Anybody following along? Okay, so see, I'm just rotating it, a little bit of air in the middle, in the center, but not too much. Alright. Okay, that should be perfect. So it's still slightly pliable, but not so much that it's going to completely fall down when I'm not looking. Okay. So what we're going to do now is we're going to get our blow torches. So this is just a little chef's torch, and we're going to reheat the edges slightly. So I do not recommend holding things and torching them. If you can, just set it upside down on your mat or set it on its side and torch. We're just going to torch at the edges and then to the inside and outside a little, so you get kind of maybe a 1/4 inch to 1/2 inch all the way around is heated. You can even go in sections if you prefer, but I like to look what the whole thing's going to look like together. So I like to do it all at once, but whatever's easier for you. There we go. Okay.
Nicole said she's just going to watch for now, and she'll do hers later. You always make it look so easy.
Well, remember, I have done a million of these, so practice really does make perfect. But yeah, it definitely helps to practice and watch a little bit. So if you prefer to watch, definitely watch and then go back and do it. So see, as I'm turning this around, I'm using the tail. I'm not grabbing it yet. You want to wait a good 5 to 10 seconds at least before you touch something you just blowtorched. Okay, now I'm going to go around. I'm going to feel the edges. They feel much more pliable now, but if they don't, you can go back and heat. It just depends on how heavy-handed you are with the torch. I'm going to do a tiny bit more.
And you can do this over and over potentially.
Absolutely. There's no time limit now because we're just reheating as needed. So if you're playing and messing with it and it gets too cool, heat it again.
Or melt it all down.
Yeah, or melt it all down. Okay, so now I'm going to start pinching the edges a little bit. If it looks too chunky anywhere, you can kind of thin them out slightly. Remember, this is fantasy, and it's supposed to look kind of like glass, so it doesn't have to be super thin and delicate. That's up to you. And I'm also going to start ruffling the edges slightly. So when I ruffle edges, I'm going to grab 2 spots next to each other and push in opposite directions. So I'm going to push and then go next to it, push. And you see how that starts to give it almost like a zigzagged effect on the edge. Some edges are not quite pliable enough because they were a little thicker. So I'm going to go back and add some heat. Wait 5 to 10 seconds before I touch it.
Said Lisa thinks you should do a hummingbird now to go with the flower.
Oh, that would be so pretty.
Your hummingbird class is a lot of fun.
Yeah, I do some blown hummingbirds. I've done some classes in that before, and they look super, super cute. All right. So I like to kind of make mine a little bit less perfect. You can make yours perfect if that's what the style that you like. But I'm going to kind of like mess these up a little bit just so that they're not quite so perfect. It has, you know, some that are bigger, some that are smaller, some are kind of doubling on themselves, almost like a wrinkle.
What if a piece snapped off?
If a piece snapped off, you can heat that piece and stick it back on with the torch, and then just heat the whole thing again to make it pliable and kind of blend it in. Or that's where decoration goes. If you're going to put like a bird over this or some other little flowers or a grouping of them, you just kind of position it. It's just like, yeah, the ladybug that we did in our shaker cookies. You can make a little one of those and put it on, or a little butterfly from the last one. Okay, so see how I'm just kind of ruffling those edges. I want it to look symmetrical, but not necessarily perfect for something like this because I like that free-formed look. And then just making sure you can do the same thing and reheat the stem if you needed to, if you wanted to shape it a different way. I'm pretty happy with how that's looking, so I'm going to go ahead and cool that down. But remember that you can just reheat this and keep going if you wanted to. By thinning out that edge and adding some of that texture, it's really, really going to help make it look finished. You can see already the difference between the one that I started with that I didn't finish the edge and this one. It just makes it look a lot more purposeful and less kind of rough. So I'm just going to cool this in front of my fan, but it will cool at room temperature, no problem. It just may take a couple extra minutes. Now until it's completely cooled down, so there's really not any heat left to it. It can have a teeny tiny bit, but it really shouldn't have too much because we're about to add heat on top of it again. So we want to just cool it all the way down so that nothing is going to budge while we are painting.
Sidney, Sophia's on our new store in Portugal.
Ooh, hi! Hi, Sophia.
We're so excited.
Super, super excited. Okay. Yeah, now I'm thinking of all the different things we can do with these different shapes. As this is cooling, I want to show you a slight variation too. Let's see, I'll probably have them sit. Sometimes they decide where they're going to sit. That'll be perfect. I want to show you a slight variation. So if you got our accessory kit, this is the cone that came with it. So it's just the smooth silicone cone. But we also have a different one that is on our website too. This is, what do we call this? The star cone? This is the star cone. And so this one actually has lines in it, as you can see. So when you press the Isomalt down around it, it is going to give it those indents. So of course you could go back and heat and put indents in, but it's hard to get them perfect, and you know, that's just one more step that you have to spend time on. So with this, it does it for you. And I have a couple of examples here.
Yeah, sharp lines on Isomalt.
Yeah, exactly. Sharp lines and Isomalt are not usually cohesive together, easy to get. It takes a lot of time. Where this, the lines are so deep and sharp that it really, really makes them prominent. Isn't that cool? So these are just going to give you another element. And you can see this one here that I did, this flower on the right. I believe it's the right for you guys too. This flower here, I didn't do a stem on it. I just did a little kind of end. So you could insert that into a cake. You can add it into a bouquet, you know, pushed all together. Imagine how amazing this would be if you decorated a cake in just these little rosettes. It's going to look like a, you know, kind of like that abstract glass flower look. You can make them much flatter, or you can make them more pointed at the back. There's just so many different things that you can do with it. Okay. Okay, how's everybody doing? Anybody who's following along? We're going to switch to painting. Now, of course, you can make another flower, or you can keep practicing these. If you don't particularly want to use this flower as your finished piece, so let's say you're really new to this, you're not quite happy with your technique yet, don't worry. What I'll have you guys do is either keep making them and then just go back and re-watch as you need to when you finally have one and you want to go ahead and paint it. Or what you can do is take some of your excess Isomalt and just pour a little puddle and let it cool flat, just like a flat disc, and you can practice your painting technique on that. That way you don't necessarily get it on your finished piece yet, so that you kind of know what you're doing going into it. If you want to, you can do that anyway, but I'm going to show you on my flower how we're going to do this.
So Brooke said the star cone almost has a hibiscus look to it.
Oh, that would be beautiful for hibiscuses. Yeah, you could put centers in these if you wanted to. You can hand sculpt them out of Isomalt or mixed mediums. You can make them out of gum paste. You can make them, you know, with stamens or, you know, modeling chocolate or whatever you wanted to. That would be really good. That's a good idea. Okay, so we are going to use two different kinds of color today. The main thing that we're going to be using is gel color. Now, I got a couple questions from different people of, you know, can I use this kind of color or that kind of color? And the answer is kind of, you just have to test it, because depending on what is in the colors is going to react differently. So this is the Artisan Accents gel color, and these I'm just going to thin down with a tiny bit of water. Dad, would you mind going and just filling that up halfway? Thank you, with water. I'm just going to thin that down with a little bit of water, and that is what's going to paint on. You can also use their dilution solution if you want, but I wanted to make sure it was accessible for anyone depending on what kind of gel color you had, just to thin it down slightly. But basically that is, I know, going to give it this really cool, thank you, watercolor effect. So that's what I'm using. Now you can, again, experiment with different colors, but I've found that a gel-based color is the thickest and it works the best for this. You can use airbrush colors, but it's going to be a little thinner and not as intense. And we are going to be using some powdered colors too, but we are going to use those in a different way because they're not going to be quite the same look. All right, I'm just going to bring my flower back over here. And we're going to mix some of this color with a little bit of water. So it's up to you kind of what effect you want and how thick you want and what colors you want to use. I'm using azure blue and snow white for this. So I'm just going to take my white. This white is pretty thin, so I may not really want to put too much water into it, but I'm just going to do a tiny little splash just to thin it so it paints on easier.
Sidney, can they reuse the Isomalt if they paint it?
You can reuse the Isomalt if you paint it, as long as the paint is dry. But I generally would only recommend doing that if you like the colors, because if I remelted this one, it's going to take on that gold and it's going to take on the white.
Even though it's a gel, it can mix in?
If it's a gel, because it's evaporated, it's not going to be quite as big of a deal when it mixes in, but it's better to not mix anything in with gel color on it. If you're using an airbrush color, that would be okay, but the gel color could affect the texture for pulling. Okay, I'll do a little bit more white.
Sidney, Paul's on.
Hi, Paul.
Tell them about our cake flicks all over the world tomorrow.
Yes.
Caking all over the world.
Yeah, Caking All Over the World is happening on the Cake Flicks channel tomorrow. Make sure that you guys don't miss that. There's tons of amazing artists that are going to be demonstrating all day, so make sure you go on the Cake Flicks channel for that. And I'm also super excited that I'm going to be on Cake Flicks Live TV, which is their brand new platform of live streams that are going to be happening every week. So I'm actually going to have a show. I'm super, super excited about it, so I hope you guys tune in, and we will be doing projects like this every week.
And what's your show called? Oh,
my show is called Sidney's Sweet Adventures. It is going to be every Wednesday. The next one that I'm doing is this Wednesday. It's going to be at 8 p.m. UK, which is, I believe, 3 p.m. Eastern time here in the US, but they are working on something that is going to make it accessible at 8 p.m. Eastern time, as well as UK time and Australia. So tune in for that, or stay tuned for that. We will announce that as soon as we have it.
Oh, and the next week, Nicholas, the green tornado.
Yes, Nicholas is going to be on as well, starting the week after, I believe. So we're going to have a lemon and lime back-to-back show going on. Okay, so I have my white color on a fan brush. You can use a wide paintbrush. You can use any brush for this, but I like the fan brush. And I'm just going to start painting. Depending on how thick or thin you do the paint is going to give you different effects, so just play around with that. But I'm just starting in the center and working my way out. All right.
And where do you find Cake Flicks?
Cake Flicks is going to be on their Facebook page, so if you just search Cake Flicks, or if you go on my page, I've posted a lot about it, so you can go find a link through that. Okay, so I'm going to go almost all the way up to the edge here with the white. I know that I'm covering up all of that blue, but when we blend it in just a second, you're going to start seeing that blue underneath, which is why we started with a solid color rather than a just a clear Isomalt. Okay, so I'm going to start with that. I mean, that looks cool by itself, but we want to blend it in a little bit so that it's not quite so harsh. So what we're going to do, this is a technique that is exclusive to Isomalt because we are going to blowtorch over it. You can't really blowtorch on fondant or modeling chocolate. It will just burn and melt. You can get cool effects with that, but to really blend in the color, we're going to be using our torch with this and melting the Isomalt into the color in some places. I am going to hold this to torch, but I recommend setting it down and torching, not holding it. I just want to make sure you guys can see it. But set it down to blowtorch to do this, but I want to hold it up so you guys can see what's happening. I'm going to turn it on low so that the flame is not super big, because you don't want to warp the flower. Remember, adding heat to the flower is going to warp it, whereas, you know, in too heavy of layers, you want to go very light layers with this.
Sidney, Samantha would like to know, mixing the color with water, won't that start to break down the Isomalt?
It will not, as long as you're not mixing the color into the Isomalt, or the water into the Isomalt itself. Even then, I mean, we use liquid airbrush colors. A couple drops is okay. But as long as you are doing a very thin coating of paint, it should not eat through the Isomalt like it would through a real sugar. If you were to leave like a puddle of water on the surface of Isomalt, it would eat through, but this is so thin that it shouldn't. Okay, so I'm just going to start torching. And look at that already. You see how it's starting to break up and kind of bubble? I'm going to hold this up closer to this camera first. Can you guys see that? And then I'll hold it up for Instagram to see. You see how it broke through? Already, it looks really cool. You could stop there and it would be done. But if you wanted to, you can keep going. So the more you do, it's melting the Isomalt and popping through. It's breaking through the surface of the paint and starting to marbleize.
Sidney, Anna would like to know, how thick is your Isomalt flour?
I would say that mine's maybe, it gets thicker as it goes down, so the edges are very thin, maybe a 1/16 of an inch, but as it goes through, I would say it's probably maybe an 1/8 of an inch to a 1/4 of an inch. Remember that gravity is and direction is having a really big effect on this. So if you're holding your flour up, which you shouldn't be, it should be flat, but let's say I'm holding my flour up, gravity's pulling down. So the more that I torch, it's going to start liquefying and pulling that color in. So you're going to get streaks that go in. If I'm on its side, it's going to start basically wherever the gravity's telling it to go, depending on the slant of the Isomalt, is where it's going to go, as well as which way you're torching. So if I'm torching this way, all of the fire, the flame, is pushing that way, and it's going to push the color in certain directions. So that gives you a lot of control as far as which way you want the color to flow.
Jessie Ann says it looks a lot like the crackling effect, like on the fondant, where
Yeah.
you actually torch the fondant.
It kind of is. It's like the Isomalt equivalent to that almost. It's breaking through the color, and it kind of, as it moves around, it's almost like when I watch a lot of the videos where they're doing those like acrylic pours and painting techniques. It's kind of that same idea where it's popping the bubbles through and it's starting to liquefy everything together. Now, because I've been heating this a while, I can feel the outsides of my flour are starting to get warm and soft. We don't want our flour to collapse or get a dent in the side, especially because the paint is wet right now and we can't really push it back out from the inside. So periodically I'm going to stop and cool from the inside and the outside till it's back to a cool temperature.
Kate wondered, could you put it in a cup when heating it?
Yeah, you can put it in a cup as long as it's a heat safe, like a metal bowl or something, not a plastic cup. That would melt unless you're very, very careful about not hitting it. You can make some sort of form too, where you kind of make a hole in something and, you know, push the end through. You can use, like, if your flour's not too big and heavy, you could probably push the end of it into a piece of foam. But foam is very, very meltable, so just be careful with the torch around it. Stick to the inside of your flour. So you can see already it's super cool. It has like a watercolory, almost like an ocean foam effect. And I really like how it looks. The reason that I like using white with this is because it's so stark and opaque against the clear color in the background. It pops nicely. If I just were to use like the blue, the darker blue color, or just a gel color on its own, it's going to be transparent, so it's going to not pop as well. Anything that you want to pop, always mix in white into the color, and that's going to make it solid so that it is going to be more opaque and pop on top. Unless you're going for a subtle finish, if you just want clear on clear, but remember that it's going to kind of take the colors together, just like laying something clear, a clear color onto another color. It's going to take those colors, so make sure that you want more of a subtle effect. If you want more of an opaque effect, I would mix in some of the white into whatever other color that you're using. It even looks cool from the outside because you can see the light through it and it gives it that cool, like, crackly look. I don't know if you guys can see it in the lighting, but... Alright, so it's feeling like it's solidified back down now. I'm going to go in with a little bit of blue this time. Okay.
If you don't have a fan, you could just let it cool.
Just let it cool at room temperature, yep. Just keep rotating it so it doesn't slump. Or you can go in like a draft. If you have a really cool air vent in your house, you can use that. Let's see, I'm going to grab a different brush. Here. I'm going to take a little bit of this blue and maybe just a scoop of the water. Alright, I'm going to start adding a little bit of depth into this, so I want to do some of this dark blue in just circular motions down in the kind of very point of the inside of the flower. And I'm not worrying about being careful with this because we're just going to blend it in, so you don't have to be careful at all. You just want to get the color where you want it. Okay, and then if you want to put it anywhere else, you can kind of add some specks with your paintbrush. just to kind of start blending that color in and adding some shading.
Anna says she can't do a cool with her vent because they still have their heat on. In Illinois, it's brutal.
Oh, yeah, okay. If it's cool outside and you have your heat on, don't hold it in front of a vent. That would probably melt. But definitely just wait for it to cool on its own.
You mean it's not spring there yet?
Alright, so see how I layered some of that blue on top of the white, and the white is breaking through as well. So I'm seeing some of the white break through the dark blue. I'm also seeing just some of the blue Isomalt color come through. And so you're getting some really, really cool splotchy effects. And another cool part about this, we are going to glaze this as always with our edible glaze, but we are basically mixing the color in, so it's not going to be as smudgeable because you're melting the surface of the Isomalt, so the color is able to sink in a little, and it's almost part of the Isomalt now. So I'm going to cool this back down, and then we're going to do some gold. Alright, so for the gold, we're going to do something a little different. So this is where I said, just play around with your colors, because depending on what's in them, it's going to torch differently. So I am going to use a little bit of alcohol this time, mixed with my gold luster dust. So I'm going to grab another cup, and I'm going to use more of a flat brush this time, instead of a fan, so it's a little bit more dense, but you could use whichever is going to be easier. Let's not do this in front of the fan, so it doesn't blow everywhere. Okay, so I'm going to mix in some alcohol. The more alcohol you put in, the more opaque the color is going to be, so it's up to you how much you thin it. Mix in a little more. This is a pretty big flower, so we need a good amount. Alright. And then I just wanted my edges to pop a little more because I felt like they were getting sort of lost, so that's why I'm adding this gold. But of course, remember that all of this is personal preference. It's all about how you want your flower to look, so it's up to you. So I'm just going to pull in from the edge.
So when you have a little break, I'm going to change the Instagram because it's only going to give me an hour and I don't want anybody to miss anything.
Okay, that's a good time now for this. All I'm doing is just pulling my color in from the edge, so I'll just work on this and I will start again in a second.
Instagram will be back in 30 seconds.
So I'm just pulling this color down. Let me know whenever Instagram's back up.
Just 1 second. Okay, Instagram, we are back.
Instagram's back. Welcome back, guys.
Nobody's on yet, but they'll come back.
Sidney, Nicole would like to know, did you use this kind of painting technique with glass blowing?
No, it's a little bit different with glass blowing. They roll their colors, their warm glass, into specks of cooled glass, and then they reheat it all together. But the way that Isomalt heats up, it doesn't quite blend together smoothly like glass does, because you have to heat it a lot hotter with glass. So that's why I'm doing a painting technique rather than a kind of mixing technique. Okay, so see how I just met up at the edge of the white, and I'm just going to, now when I only have a little bit on my brush, kind of pull some of that gold down. This is going to be a lot different when we torch over it. Make sure that your alcohol has dried. I'm using vodka or Everclear. Make sure that your alcohol has dried before you torch over this, because you don't want to torch on alcohol. That is not a good idea unless you're flambeing something. So I'm just letting this cool. It's pretty much already dry because I am under a draft, and everything dries very quickly right here. So wait till there's no sheen left on it, and then it's going to smooth the color a little, but it's not necessarily going to start giving those bursts. It's just going to smooth in the color and blend it. So it's not going to look quite as brush stroked. So hopefully you can see the difference between that side that I just did and the other side. It just pulls the color and mixes it a little better. Alright. So I just kind of have an ombre effect going on from the white to the gold. What I did with my other flower, and I'm going to show you guys what I'm doing now, is I wanted to pull a little bit of that warm color because we got really with that blue, and then that white is really bright. Doesn't look quite as cohesive right now, so I am going to splatter a little bit of the gold onto the inside of the piece. So I'm just going to take a little bit here, and then I'm just going to kind of tap it on my finger, or you can flick it with your finger if you want to, and see how that just pulled a little bit of that color in. Now you can leave it just a stark contrast of that gold speckles against the white and the blue, or you can torch over a little to make it a little softer, which is what I'm going to do. It'll also start to pull that white again through. So your white, if you layer the gold on top, is still going to have the same effect. It's going to start breaking through, so that is a way you can kind of cheat and start emulsifying the colors together, is by layering different kinds of color. Their possibilities are really endless with this, as you guys can see, using different kinds of color. Watercolor effects are also going to be really easy to get with airbrush colors, but remember they're going to be a lot more subtle of colors. So that's why I'm using the gel colors, because they're a little bit more stark and contrasting. But airbrush colors paint on beautifully because there is so much water in them.
Sidney, Sandra said, probably because she was watching, the Isomalt got too cold and hard. What was your method for remelting? If it gets too hard? To
reheat your edges, you can use the torch and then wait 10 seconds. If you're reheating the entire puddle of Isomalt to remake another piece, you can fold it in your mat for 5-second intervals in the microwave and take it out, and it should go back to pliable. Just be careful, because the microwave can cause it to get warm spots and or liquid spots, and you don't want to stick your finger in it. So just make sure you have your gloves on and fold the mat like we did in the beginning until it comes back to a clay.
I think that doing it all together instead of watching the video will be easier too.
Yes, you're going to get that rhythm once you're kind of focusing, because right now you're watching your piece and you're making, watching the video. So once you can kind of focus all at once, temperature and time is really key with Isomalt, so it's better if you can focus and not be distracted by me talking. So afterwards, if you kind of go, play around a little bit, it's going to be easier the more and more you do it. All right. So you can go back and re-highlight the edges a little bit more if you wanted to, or you can add more colors. I did not add any color onto the stem, but of course that's all personal choice. If you wanted to add some golds into there, you can even dry dust the gold to make it more of a very subtle sheen over the whole thing. It's all up to you. I think these would be really cool in a whole bunch of different colors. You could do like reds and oranges and do like fire kind of feel to it. You can do purples and pinks and make them really cute and whimsical. The sky's really the limit, and I'm super excited to see what you guys come up with this technique too. Like we were talking about phonographs and shells and different things like that. I can't wait. So make sure you tag me in pictures as always, because I love seeing you guys' ideas. You can do the same technique on the more riveted cones with that other form that I showed you, but remember that if you're doing that, the more you torch over these ridges, the more that they can smooth over and melt together. So don't torch too much, keep your painting to a minimum with this, or just be torching in very light layers and cooling really quickly, torching, cooling, so that it stays in its shape and you're not melting over it.
To me, when you look at it on the camera, you see the color already is variegated with the star former.
It is, yeah. Because of the way that light reflects on Isomalt, different depths, and it's really anything, even with sculpting, lighting and kind of depth is really important, because the thicker spots with this, since it's transparent, is going to appear more saturated in color and a lot more intense and bright, where the thin areas are going to look a lot more desaturated or a lot less colorful and more see-through and clear. So you're kind of playing with light and with perspective as well as with color. So yeah, you already kind of have some variation. If I had done this in a darker color, you're going to have a way more contrasting variation, because the thin spots are still going to look very clear as opposed to the thicker spots that would be darker color. So
Sandra's wondering, if you combine different melted colors, would they blend together too much?
I don't think that they would blend together too much, no.
Like
I think
ribbons.
that, yeah, just like with ribbons, how you can add them together when they're pliable, you could absolutely do that. You can kind of marbleize the colors together of your Isomalt, either in specks or in strips, or, you know, however you wanted to do it. You do have to be careful because different colors of Isomalt are going to be different textures, just like with fondant, where red fondant and white fondant are very, very different textures. The more color that you add into Isomalt, it will affect the texture. So just make sure that one is not too hard and one is not too soft. Use your pulling ability to kind of balance them out. One may need to be pulled more than the other to get them to similar textures, if that makes sense.
Yeah, Nicole asked almost the same question. After.
You guys are all on the same track.
Lots of ideas.
Awesome. Okay, so this is pretty much completely cool. Now, remember, our final step is going to be glazing. So we spray all of our finished pieces with the clear edible glaze spray. This is going to make sure that it is going to be locked in, and it is going to make sure that the Isomalt does not take in any more moisture. It won't get sticky or cloudy from the humidity, and it'll also lock in your paint so that it won't smudge and it won't move around. Now remember not to spray this on anything other than your piece. So take all of your mats away, take all of your tools away, take off your watch, move your phone, because this stuff is edible but it doesn't like to come off. So I usually put plastic, like a tablecloth or something, over my whole entire work surface, and I just set this on it in spray and then let it dry, and it will lock in all your color. It'll also make your color a lot more vibrant, especially those parts that we did with alcohol, because alcohol can dull the Isomalt slightly. But I think you guys can probably see how much more vibrant the one that I did before that has been glazed is. But I made this a couple weeks ago and it has not gotten cloudy or anything from that glaze. So there we go. There is our watercolor abstract flower. I'm going to tilt the camera up so that I can hold it up to you guys. And you can see it from the front. And if you have any final questions, you can go ahead and ask them in the chat now. Hello, everybody. Alright, let me get this locked in. There we go. Okay. So here is our finished piece. You can see the size scale of it. You can see all those beautiful kind of striations and bubbles in the color of it. And you can play around with different colors too. I've done some different variations on this with like using black as a base and then adding opaque colors on top. That looks really cool. You know, using white as a base. Anything when you can contrast the colors is going to be best. You know, the harsher the contrast is of the colors and the type of color that you're using, the more it's going to pop. So yeah, I'm super excited to see what you guys made. Do you guys have any final questions? Let's see.
They love it.
Yay, I'm so glad.
Yes, people are going to try it.
Awesome. So remember that I will post after this on my Facebook page. For Instagram, you can get to a link through my bio, but it's just under my name, Sidney Galpern. And on my Facebook, I will post a post about this live, and you guys can post your finished pieces in the comments under so we can see each other's.
Okay, Crystal would like to know, how do you store the Isomalt that you didn't use?
Yeah, that's a good question. The Isomalt that you didn't use, you don't have to glaze because you don't want to have the glaze in it if you're going to remelt it. So go ahead and put it in a sealed container like a Ziploc or an airtight container, like a Glad container. As long as it's airtight, it will be fine. Even if the Isomalt gets dull and cloudy from the humidity, it is going to be fine once you remelt it. So don't worry about that. Just keep it in a sealed container.
What if you had heated it in a glass bowl?
You can just leave it in the bowl too, or even in a silicone bowl. Any bowl that you have it in, if you wanted to, just cover it with plastic wrap, like press and seal, or put the whole thing in a Ziploc, and yeah, just remelt it whenever you need to.
Somebody asked, do you have a Cinderella slipper kit?
We have a shoe kit. It's on our website. You can see on simicakes.com, SIMI cakes. There we have a variation.
I'm not sure it's on right now.
Oh, it may not be on right now.
If you email us.
Yeah, email us, and then we can talk more about that.
Yeah, you can store it in the Pyrex.
Yes, you can answer. Yeah, definitely. Awesome. If you guys have any other questions, now if you're going to go ahead and do this afterwards, after watching, go ahead and, you know, make your pieces. But if you have any questions, you can comment, and I'll be going back through the comments. Or you're always welcome to message me directly on Instagram or on Facebook here.
Kathy said she already broke her tail off. But
Oh,
she
no.
loves it, and she'll make it again. But can't she put it back on?
Oh, good. Yeah, you can torch it back on. Absolutely. Just torch and stick it back on and put some paint over it. You won't be able to see. But yeah, that's the beauty of Isomalt. It never goes bad, and it can be reheated as many times as you want. So don't be discouraged if something cracks or breaks from it being too cool.
Go through
or
every
if it
step.
slumps. Yeah, go through every step, even if something happens. So let's say you're making it and it cracks, or you're making it and you pop a hole through it, or anything like that. Don't stop, because and the whole trail of, let's say there's 10 steps, if you stop at step 5 and start again, you're not knowing what those last 5 steps are. So the more practice you get with all the steps, maybe even on a piece that you don't necessarily care about looking good, you're just learning the technique and the feel of it, that's always the best to do. So try, if you can, if it's salvageable, go through the whole process each and every time, and that way when you do another one, you know every single step what to expect.
Kathy says yes, she blew a hole in the side, but she fixed that too.
Good. Definitely. And that's how you learn to fix things too, right? You don't want to just give up, because you can always learn how to fix things and how to save them and not necessarily have to start from scratch. Awesome. Okay, so yeah, if you guys have any other questions, make sure to DM them to me or comment here if you're watching later. I also wanted to talk a little bit about my next Playdate, my Isomalt Playdate. We are going to be doing that, I believe, on May 29th is what we decided, May 29th. And that is going to be my next Isomalt Playdate. We are going to be doing this piece down here. This is a stained glass, move my hand, rose cookie. So you can see that we have this really pretty, let me not get the glare on it. This is an Isomalt transfer sheet, so it is transparent, and you can see that beautiful design on it. I'm going to be talking all about how I do this really realistic cobblestone on the outside. This is a cookie, so you can see the design in there. I'm going to be talking all about how I do this realistic cobblestone design and how to make either paint your own cookies or customize them to your color scheme and all of that. So we're going to be doing that on May 29th. That is the next date, and I will have more information on it. We'll probably post it tomorrow is what we usually do. So make sure to stay tuned tomorrow for all the info about the kits and everything like that.
All of these are going to be listed on your YouTube channel?
Yes, I've started putting, you can find these on my Facebook page, but it's hard to kind of scroll through and find them from weeks ago. So I've been putting all of my Isomalt Playdates on my YouTube channel. So my YouTube channel is under my name as well, Sidney Galpern, and there is a link on my website if you want to go through that. That has all of the past three Playdates that I've done on my channel. If you want to watch my Isomalt or general live streams that I've done on other places, you can go through them. So like my cake flicks and my icing images ones that I've done, you can go through them. But any that have been on my channel, you can watch there. So I'll be putting this one up in the next few days, and the 3 that I've done previously are on there too. So you can go back.
And it will be here.
Yeah, and it'll be here too. So you can always just scroll through my Facebook and find it here as well. But yeah, definitely make sure to check that out. And again, a reminder, I know I talked about it earlier, but I'm super excited to be doing another live stream every single week. I have my own show, my own time slot on Cakeflix Live TV. That will be on the Cakeflix page. So not on my page here, it will be on Cakeflix. I'll post about it before it's happening and, you know, before about what we're doing. The first one that we're doing on Wednesday is going to be at 3 p.m. EST, and I'm doing Isomalt sails, Isomalt shards with designs in them, kind of a whole bunch of different abstract pieces that are going to be going on your cakes. So that is the first thing that we're going to be doing that week. I also have one that you can watch on the Cakeflix page as well that I did last week. All right, awesome.
Happy Mother's Day, everyone.
Oh yes, happy Mother's Day. Yeah, to all the awesome mothers here. Make sure to tag me in pictures if you're using this as a Mother's Day gift, or maybe photo to send them if you aren't able to go see your mothers. But make sure to tag me in all your pictures. I'll post that post up so everybody can see each other's pieces. And yeah, thank you so much for joining me.
Be safe.
Be safe, stay healthy, and I will see you next time. Bye guys.